He's coming. We're killing this one.
You don't have to understand how a deer's nose works to kill one, but it's important to understand your opponent. So that's why in this video, we're going to go over how a deer's nose works, how it smells, what it smells, 2 different organs inside the nose, and we're also going to talk about how a deer can judge how far away you are by your scent. I'm going to give you a tip on how to use this information and make smarter setups on those mature bucks. So let's dive into it. A deer's nose is its primary survival tool. For a whitetail, the nose is the first line of defense, far more important than eyes or ears. While humans rely heavily on sight, and to a lesser extent hearing, a deer's survival is rooted in its ability to detect, analyze, and interpret scents in its environment. Wildlife biologists, including Dr. Carl V. Miller and Bronson Strickland of Georgia, consistently highlight that smell is the deer's primary survival sense. Field studies and observations show that bucks can detect predators or humans hundreds of yards away, long before visual or auditory cues arrive. To put it in perspective, whitetails are estimated to smell 500 to 1,000 times better than humans. That incredible sensitivity allows a mature buck to detect humans approaching on a distant trail, sense predator activity along ridges or thickets, and identify an individual deer and determine dominance or reproductive status, and track fresh sign left hours before. From an evolutionary standpoint, smell is prioritized because predators rarely announce themselves, like wolves, coyotes, bobcats, and humans often move silently and use cover to remain hidden. Vision or hearing alone is just too slow or unreliable for survival. Scent, however, travels ahead of the threat, and it provides an early warning, giving the deer time to assess and flee or take a defensive action. And this also explains why bucks are so cautious on public land. Because they're constantly sampling the air and analyzing layers of scent, they're interpreting the meaning before they ever lift their head. Even a faint whiff of human presence in the wind can trigger avoidance behavior, sometimes hours before the hunter is even visible. In short, a deer's nose isn't just a sense, it's a biological radar system, and it's constantly scanning, parsing, and prioritizing information to keep the animal alive. And all other senses support this primary mechanism. And that kind of brings us to how the airflow is engineered. A deer doesn't just smell the woods the way we do. Its entire nasal system is purpose-built to manipulate airflow, slow it down, and extract information from it before the air even reaches the lungs. When a whitetail inhales, air is not pulled on a straight path. Instead, it's deliberately delivered into a maze of internal passages. Redirection is critical. Speed is the enemy of scent detection. Fast-moving air carries information past sensors, and the slow air gives scent molecules time to be captured, separated, and analyzed. Inside the nasal cavity are nasal turbinates, intricately folded, scroll-like bone structures, and they're covered in moist, highly vascular tissue. These turbinates dramatically increase the internal surface area of the nose, and every fold is another opportunity for microscopic scent particles to kind of collide with mucus, dissolve, and be evaluated by the olfactory receptors. Think of it less like breathing through a straw and more like pulling air through a high-efficiency filter system. CT scan-based anatomical studies published in journals such as the Anatomical Record show that deer possess a far more internal nasal complexity than humans. Where our nasal passages are relatively simple and direct, a deer's nose is layered and it's curved and compartmentalized. This complexity allows them to strip scent from air even at low concentrations or detect multiple odor sources simultaneously, continue analyzing scent while breathing normally. Some portions of the airflow are routed specifically toward the olfactory tissue. While other portions move on to respiration, this means deer can smell with precision without sacrificing oxygen intake, even while moving, feeding, or fleeing. For a hunter, this matters because a deer isn't just detecting that something smells wrong, it's gathering detailed information: age of the scent, direction of travel, intensity, whether it belongs in that environment. You're not dealing with a passive nose. You're dealing with an engineered sensing system refined by millions of years of predator avoidance. And their smells come in layers. A deer does not smell the woods as one blended background odor the way humans often do. It doesn't register forest smell and then notice something off inside it. Instead, a deer experiences scent in layers, separate, identifiable odor signatures stacked on top of one another, kind of like slices of a cake. At the core of this ability is receptor volume and diversity. Whitetails possess hundreds of millions of olfactory receptors, and that's dwarfing human capability. More importantly, those receptors are not redundant. Each type is tuned to respond to a specific chemical compound: fatty acids, proteins, pheromones, bacterial byproducts, plant volatiles, and foreign synthetics. And when air is pulled across the olfactory tissue, different compounds bind to different receptors at the same time, and a deer's brain does not merge all those signals into one single cell. It keeps them separate and discrete. So instead of "this smells like woods, but something is off," a deer perceives something closer to the damp soil, oak leaf tannins, recent deer movement, old deer movement, non-native mammal, uprights, sweating, synthetic materials, all at once, separately. Mammalian olfaction research consistently shows that animals with high receptor diversity do not perceive odor blends the way humans do. Their brains are wired for pattern recognition and not averaging, and each odor has a chemical fingerprint, and those fingerprints remain identifiable even when it's mixed with dozens of others. And this is why cover scent doesn't hide human odor. You're not masking anything, you're just adding another layer. And that layer doesn't belong. A whitetail doesn't get confused by human scent mixed with forest scent. It simply detects a foreign signature embedded within familiar layers. Much like spotting a thread that's the wrong color in your jeans or your shirt, it stands out precisely because everything else kind of makes sense with the pattern. It blends in. And this layer perception also explains why deer can detect a hunter who walked through like hours earlier, or differentiate between old scent and fresh scent, recognizes individual deer and non-deer animals, and it also gives it the ability to identify threat level without visual confirmation. And to a mature buck, human odor isn't alarming because it's strong. It's alarming because it's chemically wrong for that place at that time. And understanding this kind of shifts how you think about wind, access, and stand placement. You're not trying to beat a nose. You're trying to avoid inserting a foreign layer into a system that reads in high resolution. And when I say high resolution, that's because a deer can analyze multiple odors at the same time. A whitetail does not analyze scent in a linear one-by-one sequence, and it doesn't finish identifying one smell and then move on to the next. Its olfactory system is built for parallel processing, evaluating multiple odor sources simultaneously. And biologists estimate that a deer can actively process up to 6 different sources at a time. And each of these odors is composed of a different chemical compound, and each compound activates a different group of olfactory receptors inside the nasal cavity. And those receptor groups, they fire independently, sending separate electrical signals along parallel neural pathways to the olfactory bulb and deeper into the brain structure. Nothing gets paused. The deer's brain doesn't silence background scent to investigate dangerous scent. Instead, it compares everything at once. So it's comparing the ambient forest and familiar deer scents and social signals, does, fawns, and dominant bucks, or historical scent, and newer, changing, or even foreign or threatening odors. And all of these inputs arrive together and evaluated in relation to one another. And this is why deer can appear relaxed, feeding and chewing and flicking its ears, while still knowing something isn't right. It hasn't committed to flight because it doesn't need to. It's already running threat assessment in the background continuously. And from the deer's perspective, smelling is not an event, it's like a constant stream of data. And this ability explains several behaviors that frustrate hunters, like a buck feeding calmly and then suddenly locking up, or say a deer that keeps eating while slowly drifting downwind, or a mature buck that never looks at you but still leaves. The moment human odor enters the scent field, it doesn't interrupt other smells. It just joins them, and its chemical profile is immediately compared against everything else the deer is already sensing. And because the deer is processing multiple odors in parallel, it doesn't need confirmation, or it doesn't need to stop or raise its nose or stomp. If the foreign scent doesn't fit the environment pattern, the decision is made quietly. This is also why mature deer often don't blow or flag. They don't need to advertise danger, they've already identified it. They've categorized it and chosen avoidance over confrontation. And for the public land hunter, this matters because you're not competing for attention, you're competing against a real-time analytical system that never shuts off. You're not being checked by a deer, you're being monitored. So the smell doesn't stop at detection. And for a whitetail, detection is only the first step. Once scent molecules are captured in the nasal cavity and converted into electrical signals, those signals are sent directly to the olfactory bulb, a dedicated processing center at the front of the brain. In deer, their structure is proportionally much larger and more developed than in humans, reflecting how central smell is to survival. The olfactory bulb doesn't ask, "Do I smell something?" It asks, "What does this mean?" And inside the bulb, incoming signals are organized and compared against stored scent templates, patterns, built from a lifetime of experience. And this is where the brain determines what the odor is, whether it belongs, how recent it is, or whether it represents danger, neurality, or safety. This processing happens incredibly fast and on largely outside conscious behavior. A deer doesn't need to stop and think about a smell. The olfactory bulb is wired directly into emotional and survival centers of the brain. If a scent matches a known threat pattern, the response can be immediate and subtle, or it can be immediate and explosive. This explains something that confuses a lot of hunters. Intensity is not the same as threat. A faint human scent that is chemically sharp, fresh skin cells, sweat bacteria, synthetic materials, can trigger alarm even at a long distance. I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got some good information out of it and you can use it next season. Check this video out in the corner. YouTube thinks you'll like it. And don't forget about my channel memberships. It's going to be some behind the scenes footage for members, just to kind of see where I'm taking this channel and what kind of plans we have for the future. And with that being said, I want to give all the glory and thanks to God above. Without him, none of this would be possible. Thank you guys again. Peace.